Amen. We've seen the purpose of a reform line is to redeem God's people back to himself. This is why God has created or takes his people through a reform line. We see that the work begins first with the church and then with the world. We want to explore a little bit about the mechanics and the process of redemption so we can understand what's happening in our movement and what also is happening in our personal lives. It was unfortunate this morning that not everybody was here for Sister Doreen's presentation, especially at the beginning. Some people arrived slightly late. But she gave some very good information. I just want to read one of, I think it was her opening passage. Review Herald, April the 12th, 1870, paragraph 5. I was really encouraged by this statement. If you've got her notes, you already have it. If you don't, I'll give you the reference. It's Review Herald, April the 12th, 1870, paragraph 5. When you are all ready, having overcome your sins, having put away all your iniquity from you. We're familiar with the rule of repeat and enlarge, are we not? Yeah? You repeat the statement and you say it in a different way so that you get a broader and deeper understanding. So I see this opening comment as a repeat and enlarge 3 times. Otherwise it's going to say the same thing 3 times over. When you are all ready, and the definition of being ready means having overcome your sin. And the definition of having overcome your sin means having put away all your iniquity from you. You are in the condition to receive the finishing touch of immortality. Now, the finishing touch of immortality is the 3rd step in the gospel. It begins with, what does it begin with? Justification, sanctification, and glorification. So often we think as the finishing touches of immortality is when we're going to have a glorified body. We can describe it in a number of different ways, but that's what we normally understand this finishing touch of immortality is. You will agree with that? And when do we receive this immortal body? Here on earth or in heaven? Yeah. Just as you get to the touching or the joining of leaving this earth and going to heaven at the second advent. So in the final few moments of being here on earth, you're going to receive this new body. But that's not the only finishing touch of immortality, is it? Because what precedes the giving of this new body? What experience do we have to go through? Otherwise, it gives us almost a whole chapter that deals with this subject in the great controversy at the very end of the book. And it's called Jacob's Time of Trouble. So Jacob's Time of Trouble deals with the finishing touches of immortality. When the last vestiges of mortality are dealt with. So those last vicissitudes of mortality, do they just relate to our physical body? No, they don't. There is still some internal, non-physical, spiritual development that goes on. The way Ellen White describes it, I'm sure we all are familiar, is the removal of earthliness. We're familiar with that concept or that phrase? Where earthliness is removed. My brother brought this issue up the other day. I think I mentioned it again even yesterday, that the weaning of a child, when it's separated from its mother's breast, it no longer takes suck, is a removal of earthliness, or all earthly support. It's the same thing. When earthly support is removed, the earthliness begins to get taken away from us. So when we think about the weaning of Jacob as an example, when he separates from his mother, he now goes on to meat or solid food, not milk. He's separated from all earthly support, and his earthliness gets addressed and dealt with. So it's a mental issue, and that's what's being dealt with when she talks about the finishing touches of immortality. So that's why Sister Doreen said this morning, this step here, the finishing touches of mortality, when did she say that happens? Midnight. Midnight. And you know you don't get a new body at midnight, don't we? Yeah? So we have to understand what it means, these finishing touches. It's not just receiving a new body, which is how Adventists would normally understand this final work or the closing up of the gospel. It has to do with issues of the mind as well as the physical body. So I just want to make that point. I'm going to skip the rest of the paragraph. I'm just going to cut into, it's about halfway through. She speaks about waiting for a more favourable time, a better opportunity, which is never going to come, by the way. Then he says, halfway into the paragraph, I fear. Are we there? Yes. I fear that while they are thus waiting for the better time, their probation may close and they will be found in their sins. Now, I'm not sure what Ellen White means when she writes this statement. If she's speaking about the personal close of probation of an individual or a corporate close of probation, but we understand that, I would understand it in the context of our studies, that this would be a corporate close of probation, or what we would call midnight. And so while you're waiting for this better time, probation's about to close. So what's that teaching you about the mentality or the thinking of this person, whoever it is, whether it's a corporate body or an individual? So here's the close of probation, and this is the present. And what kind of time is the present? Good or bad? According to this person's logic.
It's bad.
Bad, because they're waiting for a...
Better time.
Okay, so this is the bad time. So this is the bad time. When's the good time?
Future.
Over here, isn't it? This is the good time. So they're waiting for the better time to come, because today's the bad time to sort the problem out. But while you're waiting for that better time, what's going to creep up on you? Close of probation. Now, in our movement, even in our church, we don't use the phrase better time or good time. What phrase do we use that speaks about a really beautiful, glorious time? Maybe you don't think the same way I do. What's everybody looking forward to? We all pray about it. Oh no, before that. We pray for it on the 7th day, the 7th month. The latter rain. We pray for the latter rain. Now, isn't that going to be the better time? And everything's going to get sorted out. And we're going to be in unity with one another in the upper room. And tongues of fire are going to come down upon us, and we're going to be great and holy people. This is the better time that these people are waiting for. And unfortunately, many of us, our church structure certainly does, believe the same thing. We're falling into the same trap. That we're waiting for the better time, the good time, the latter rain time, to sort out everything. But unfortunately, the close of probation is going to happen before what we think is the better time. So we're expecting the latter rain. Oh, Sister Doreen told us that this was when? She said midnight, yes? Not a trick question. She said this is midnight. So this is... What's this then? Midnight cry. And what are we waiting for in our movement that we've been told quite often now, and it's become an issue of contention in our movement, that the latter rain is going to fall sometime in the future and everything's going to be good because it's going to be the better time. But when is the better time? Today is the day of salvation. Don't harden your heart. I don't believe this model, based upon this Spirit Prophecy quote, is correct. When we place this latter rain here as a post-midnight experience, it cannot be defended. So, you're supposed to correct your character before this event. And the latter rain actually belongs here. But there's a problem. What's the problem? Why do people create this structure? Because everybody knows, Ellen White tells us explicitly about this point, that perfection of Christian character has to occur when? Under what reign? The former reign or the latter reign? Under the former reign. So, if I put the latter rain here before midnight, you begin to see that there are even problems with this model. Because you need to perfect Christian character before the latter rain falls, not in the latter rain. We're going to try and address that issue if we have time in our study. So, it was just a short diversion because I like that. I like this passage. It talks about dealing with the sin problem, making you all ready, having put away all your iniquity, so that you're in a condition to receive the finishing touch of immortality. So if we're going to put the finishing touches of immortality here, then you need to be ready in this history. And part of that readiness is in fact the latter rain. So we'll deal with that. Lord willing, if we have some time. Review and Herald, January the 10th, 1882. Just a short one sentence. Point 1, paragraph 1. No work ever undertaken by man, when I read this is just the introductory bit, it's not the point, so if you're still looking for it, you won't miss anything. No work ever undertaken by man requires greater care and skill than the proper training and education of youth and children. There are no influences so potent as those which surround us in our early years. Says the wise man, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that's just the preamble. This is the point I want us to pick up. The nature of man is threefold, and the training enjoined by Solomon comprehends the right development of the physical, intellectual, and moral powers. So, we want to deal a little bit about the nature of man. So, we've been told that the nature of man is threefold. The nature of humanity is a complex subject, and I'm not a physician, and I don't understand anything about biochemistry, and I understand only a little bit about the spirit of prophecy. So this is a simple understanding of what the nature of man looks like and its importance to us, particularly with respect to the issue of redemption and the reform line in which we are engaged in. So here she says it's dealing with the physical, intellectual and moral powers. Now I do know that when people deal with the nature of man, there's a lot of confusion on this issue. So, as I said, she speaks here about the physical, intellectual and moral powers. I want to apologise, I did find a quote here and I can't find it again now. But I'll find it for the next presentation. In another statement, she's going to say that the house in which we live is our body. So I want us to think about that. I'll say it's a reasonable good paraphrase of how she expresses it. This is the house, our physical body. And our physical body is not us. So this shell is not us. It is our house. Everybody understands that we live in a house. So we're somewhere inside this house. And often we say, okay, so here's our brain. We say the brain is us. And we know that isn't quite correct either, is it? So our brain is really not us. Now I've thought a lot about how to try and conceptualize what this model looks like and how we ourselves interact with the physical body, and then through the five senses that Sister Dorian was speaking about, how we interact with the outside world and all the nervous system and all the electricity and everything. So this is my best attempt at this. Does everybody know what jelly is? Yeah? You know what jelly is? It's sort of like this thick, thick jelly. Yeah? It's some kind of dessert that's normally sweetened, and you have a liquid and you thicken it up with some, if you're a vegan, you normally use some kind of seaweed, or use gelatin if you're not bothered about it, and it hardens it up, not so hard that it becomes solid, but it has this flexibility to it. Yeah? So if we can think of our human body as a matrix like this, or a net of some kind. Yeah? So you've got this matrix or net, and you put it into a box like this. So here's your matrix, and then you pour the jelly into the box, into the mould, and it sets. Then you take it out. Yes? So you've got this mesh, and here's the jelly block that you have. We can conceptualize that. So I'm saying this, that this mesh is the body, and the jelly is you. Yes? So you can see that you're held together as this lump because of the mesh. The mesh wasn't there, and this was a weak jelly, you would just disintegrate. So the mesh helps you to be reinforced. Now, this mesh, this body, was originally designed to be flat and square and symmetrical. A nice even shape. Now if you start doing things with this mesh, like if you get a sponge and you start twisting it, what begins to happen to that jelly? It will follow through with the mesh and it begins to be warped. Can we conceptualize that? Another way to think about it is if you've got a sponge, which would be this mesh, and you dipped it in water, and the water would be you. So now this mesh or this sponge holds you. If you start twisting the sponge, the water will follow the shape. So there's an interaction between the physical body and the spiritual being, which is what we are. Because even though we've got the brain here, you're not a brain. We know that, yeah? We're spiritual beings. And you can think it's either the brain or the body, but the brain and the body are really one thing. They're all connected together. So I want us to think about, which is I think what Sister Doreen's been discussing. She does it in a much more comprehensive fashion, but just at a simple level, I want us to see that there's an interaction between the physical and the spiritual. And when you start playing around with the physical, it starts affecting the spiritual. Can you understand that? Yeah? But the physical is not the spiritual. That's what I want us to understand. Because when we die and we go to heaven, we don't take any of these chemicals with us. In fact, Christians, even Adventists, have had the problem with this issue because they thought that the human body was part of us. Therefore, when you resurrect, the second coming, those very atoms and molecules that you were constructed of need to be located wherever they are, all over the earth, need to be brought all back together to create you again. Okay, some people are smiling, but some people were really concerned about this issue because they didn't have an understanding of what you are, what a human being is. So the way it clarifies this, she says, no, your physical being, the atoms which we think compose us, aren't us. They're just the house in which we live. And we know the only thing we're going to take to heaven with us is our character, which in and of itself is the wrong way of expressing it, because we can't take our character, because our character is us. It's not a part of us, it is us. So we're here on earth, and we're going to go to heaven. We don't take something with us to heaven. So our physical bodies are separate and distinct from who we are. Now if we had the capability, and I suspect scientifically, and I think we do at the moment, at least with animals, you could chop off someone's head, connect some pipes up to that head, and that person would be functioning perfectly well. Yeah? You could get the nervous system to work properly, you could even get them to talk. Because all this body does, it's just the machinery to keep us moving. Now if I chop my arm off, and my arm was over there and I'm over here, is my arm me? It's not me. I want us to understand that. Paul addresses this issue in a very forceful manner in the epistles. People don't understand this issue about what he speaks of being flesh. So when he speaks about the flesh, he's not speaking about your eyes looking at something bad, or your fingers picking up something wrong to eat and putting it in your mouth. That is not flesh. Then if we conceptualize or see that, the reason why that's important to understand is because of this issue here. Ellen White says in this statement, threefold nature of man is physical, intellectual and moral. And what have I just said? That the human body, even the brain, is not us. It's not the nature of man. But she said physical, intellectual and moral. So I want to suggest when she uses the word physical here, she's not primarily referring to your body. Even though it at first appears that way. So we'll hold on to that thought. And we want to look at another concept. We've got the threefold nature of a human being. We're going to read a few statements now, and Ellen White is going to speak about higher and lower. She's going to call them different ways. She's going to call them powers and passions. So I'm just going to call them powers. The higher and the lower powers. So this is Adventist Home 127.2. Adventist Home 127.2. The lower passions have their seat in the body and work through it. The word flesh, talking about Paul's writings now, the word flesh or fleshly or carnal lusts embrace the lower corrupt nature. The flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We are commanded to crucify the flesh with the affections and lusts. How shall we do it? Shall we inflict pain on the body? No. But put to death the temptation to sin. The corrupt thought is to be expelled. Every thought is to be brought into captivity to Jesus Christ. All animal propensities are to be subjected to the higher powers of the soul. The love of God must reign supreme. Christ must occupy an undivided throne. Our bodies are to be regarded as his purchased possession. The members of the body are to become the instruments of righteousness. There's a lot in this paragraph, and we could spend a lot of time dissecting this. But I want to pick up a few high points. We'll work backwards. The last sentence. The members of the body are to become the instruments of righteousness. What are the members of the body? It's our fingers, our toes, our arms, our legs. They're members of the body. And the members are supposed to be used as instruments, and the instrument is a tool of doing good. Straightforward? So our fingers, our eyes are meant to be used for acts of righteousness. But our fingers aren't in control of anything, are they? They're just the tools that someone else is using. And that someone else obviously being ourselves. So going back to the beginning. The lower passions, I'm saying this, the lower passions is part of this threefold nature. And when she said, the nature of man is threefold, she said physical, mental, and moral. Remember that? In this realm here of the physical, which is the human body, the matrix, let's read this. The lower passions, which I'm saying is part of our nature, have their seat in the body and work through it. So she talks about lower passions. I'm saying here the lower passions work through the physical body. And I think that's in agreement with what Sister Doreen was saying earlier. We have these senses that come and they produce these emotions and these feelings, or what we would call, in this context, the lower passions. And they have their seat, or they operate through, or they intimately connected with the body. That's why Ellen White uses the term physical. So some examples of this would be what? Lust, appetite, anger, jealousy, the J-E-L, J-E-A. So these are just a scattering of lower passions that we would place here. Is jealousy good or bad? It's good. Is anger good or bad? It's good. Is appetite good or bad? Good. Is lust good or bad? Good. They're all good. Let me ask you the question. Somewhere inside you, yeah? Around here, you've got some lust. Yes? Where did that lust come from? Where did the lust come from? We're not sure? Sorry? From the eyes. Anyone else? Sorry? You got to speak louder. Okay, so let me ask you an easier one. Where did the jealousy come from that's inside you? Sorry? From love. What kind of God do we serve? Jealous God. Not loving God. In the Ten Commandments, which is our reference point of understanding who God is, where does it speak about love? It doesn't. The preamble to the Ten Commandments says what? I'm a jealous God. So, where did you get your jealousy from? From God. How did He give you His jealousy? You're created in the image of God. Yes? So you got this one from God. So let's change anger to indignation. And let's add another word on top of it, righteous. So you've got righteous anger. Where do you get your anger from? Is he an angry God? If you provoke him too much. So you get this one from God. Appetite. Okay, so they're all from God, even lust. Can we see that? Every single emotion that you experience was from God. If it wasn't from God, you've got to ask yourself where it came from. You know, where did it come from? Who invented sin? You can't invent things. You can't create, you can't invent. Sin is what? Okay, but sin is the absence of God. If you walk away from God, that's the definition of sin. It's a mysterious thing. But when we have these things, these would have to be created by someone, which means they would have had to be added in. Do we have to conceptualize that? So when Adam was created, did he have lust? He must have had lust, otherwise he wouldn't have looked at his wife that often. Yeah? He must be attracted to her. Appetite, he wouldn't have eaten. Anger, jealousy. All of these are characteristics of God. That's why we have them. Now I realise that because of temptation and Satan and our own wickedness, we've manipulated these things, and now we often think of them in a negative context. Yes? So low passions have their seat in the body and work through it. The word flesh or fleshly or carnal lust embrace the lower corrupt nature. So I just want us to understand that. This lower passion or this lower power has its seat in the physical. There's a close connection between the two. And that's what Sister Doreen's, I think, been trying to explain to us about how we interact with the world and how the world interacts with us and the damage that we can do to ourselves. Yes? Just even on a chemical level. On a chemical level, it begins to affect these lower passions or lower powers. Another point we want to pick up here, it says, the flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. What does that mean? So this part of your nature cannot disobey God. I don't know if we understand what that means or the significance of that. So all these emotions, all these feelings, they cannot disobey God. So how do we end up disobeying God if they can't do that? So you say, I'm hungry, I've got appetite. Yeah? And so you eat something that you shouldn't eat. And you say, oh, I couldn't help it. I just felt hungry and I couldn't help it. So you disobeyed God. Yes? Certainly disobeyed God because it's not time to eat. Was it those feelings and emotions of hunger that disobeyed God? Can't do. It says, the flesh of itself cannot act contrary to the will of God. We are commanded to crucify the flesh with the affections and lusts. How shall we do it? Shall we inflict pain on the body? No. But put to death the temptation to sin. The corrupt thought is to be expelled. Every thought is to be brought into subjection, is to be brought into captivity to Jesus Christ. All animal propensities. What is a propensity? It means a leaning or a bent. So she says all animal propensities, and I want to suggest that she talks about lower passion, flesh, carnal lust, lower corrupt nature, animal propensities are all talking about the same thing. So we've got lower passion. I'm going to take these out. She calls it lower passion, flesh. Then she calls it carnal lust. Then she calls it animal propensity. Or animal leanings. All of these things are all this part of our nature. And they're all required to be there because God put them there. So it's not wrong to be like an animal. It's not wrong. Because animals work instinctively. But all animal propensities are to be subjected to the higher powers of the soul. The word soul is a complex word. It's used differently in Ellen White's writings and in the scriptures. But in this context, I think it's talking about the human body. Or, sorry, the human being, not the body, but the human being, the whole entity. All lower powers, animal propensities, are to be subjected to the higher powers. So, I'm going to start suggesting this now. We don't have time to do a thorough examination of the nature of a human being because of lack of time. This is the lower passions or lower powers, and these are the higher. So you've got lower and higher, and all of these are meant to be in subjection to the higher. Subjection means submit, to be a slave. The love of God must reign supreme. Christ must occupy an undivided throne. Okay, so it says Christ must occupy an undivided throne. The throne would be what? The soul. Now, for it to be divided, can you see where there's a division between the lower and the higher? You can see that? So, Christ wants to reign supremely, which means he must reign over your higher and lower. The problem with most Christians is that Christ is ruling part of our nature. Which part do you think he would be ruling? The higher. Yeah? So, Christ, but all Christians, he's ruling the higher powers, but unfortunately he's not ruling the lower powers. If Christ was ruling the higher powers only, what kind of relationship would you have with Christ? In the context of our previous studies, when we spoke about Hebrews, Jeremiah, Galatians chapter 4. What kind of relationship would you have with him? A relationship is the deal or the agreement that you go into. Sorry? You can't speak loud. I speak loud and I project my voice to the back. You could do the same.
Is it a covenant?
It's a covenant. Which one?
Marriage.
Sorry?
Marriage.
Okay, so marriage covenant, but which covenant? We've got two covenants. It's the old and new, but if he's ruling the higher powers, which one is he? Which covenant are you under? So the old or the new? Okay, so let's think about this. Sister Doreen mentioned this earlier. She said I don't know who she said, but you're a man and you look at this woman and your heart flips, she said. Yeah? Because you have these emotions of love, of joy or happiness. And where is all that happening? In the heart, yes? The new covenant, Hebrews 8:10 says, I will put my law into the heart. Okay? So, you know the heart is to do with the new covenant. And the old covenant, therefore, must be doing with the mind. So I'm saying this, if Christ has got the higher power only, you're in the old covenant. But what does he want to do? He must occupy an undivided throne. He wants all of the soul. So the new covenant is this. Does that make sense? The difference between the old and the new is that the old, Christ has control of the higher power, but not of the lower power. Yes? We're not sure? I want this to be straightforward. Say amen if it doesn't make sense. So it doesn't make sense to quite a few people. So let me do this quickly one more time. There's a house. You live in the house. You're not the house. You're just an occupier. You are a spiritual being. You're not physical. But when God created a human being, he joined the physical, the house, with the spiritual, and you became a living soul. We can conceptualize it as a sponge that's filled with water, or this mesh that's filled with jelly. You start playing around with the physical, it will affect the spiritual. Then we've seen the nature of man is threefold: physical, mental and moral. Then we've seen this physical, mental and moral can be divided into two sections: higher and lower. The lower, which Eloi in one place calls the physical, actually only has its seat or its kingdom or its throne in the physical, but it's a non-physical thing. It's what Paul would call flesh, what Ellen White would call lower passion, or the carnal lust, or animal propensities. It's emotions and feelings, which are non-physical things, but they have their seat in the physical, which means they're closely connected to the physical. Okay? Then she speaks about the higher. And she says the lower must be a subjection or submitted to the higher. Then she says Christ doesn't want to occupy an undivided, he wants to occupy an undivided throne. So you've got a single throne here, spanning the whole human being, and if this is Christ, and this is the lower powers, Christ says, I will not do this. He will not, let me not do that, let me put it this way. Here's Christ with the lower powers, and I'm going to change the lower powers and make it into a symbol of a heart. Are we okay with that? So Christ will not share the throne, which is you, with your heart. He wants all of it, or none of it. Why? According to Romans 7, why will he not do that? Because he's not allowed to. It's against the law. It's against the law to have two people sharing a throne. But in Romans chapter 7, it doesn't talk about thrones. What's the theme of Romans 7 at the beginning? Marriage. It's about marriage. And you can't have two men marrying one woman. Okay, so we've got the throne, which is you. So what is the throne a symbol of in Romans 7? We have four things. We have your current husband, we have you, we have the new husband, and we have the law. The law controls everything. Yes? Okay, so we put the law to one side, you've got the three things. Your husband, you, and Christ, the new husband. So in this model, what is the throne? You. The throne is the woman. We okay with that? So here's the throne, the woman. The heart, this corrupt animal heart, is who? Your current husband. Yes? So here's your husband. And Christ, obviously, is the new husband. Paul says it's illegal to do this. And the right here says Christ must occupy an undivided throne. It's the same concept, same principle, just a different model. Can we see that? Yeah? In fact, according to Romans 7, the only legal way to remarry is to do what? Is for your husband to die. Then you're released from the law. You're not under law. You're under grace. But you're still under the control of the law. The law still keeps an eye on what you're doing. So, when that heart dies, then you can have Christ reigning on the throne. Can you see that? Good. Let's read another passage then. Adventist Home 327, paragraph 1. Paragraph 1. I'll begin reading, and when I begin reading, it's not the point I want to make, so that you can catch up. You're not missing anything, just looking. Near the close of this earth's history, Satan will work with all his powers in the same manner and with the same temptations wherewith he tempted ancient Israel just before they entered the land of promise. He will lay snares for those who claim to keep the commandments of God and who are almost on the borders of the heavenly Canaan. He will use his powers to their utmost in order to entrap souls and to take God's professed people upon their weakest points. So she's comparing two histories. She's talking about the history of ancient Israel when they're entering into Canaan, comparing that to our history. This is the point we want to make. Those who have not brought the lower passions into subjection to the higher powers of their being, those who have allowed their minds to flow in a channel of carnal indulgence of the baser passions, Satan is determined to destroy with his temptations, to pollute their souls with licentiousness. He is not aiming especially at the lower and less important marks, but he makes use of his snares through those whom he can enlist as his agents to allure or attract men to take liberties which are condemned in the law of God. And you'll go on. So the only point I want to bring up is just before we reach the borders, and we discussed this earlier with that Review and Herald article, those who have not brought their lower passions into subjection to the higher powers of the being, and this is what it means, those who have allowed their minds to flow in a channel of carnal indulgence of the baser passions, Satan is determined to destroy with his temptations. So there's only two groups, we understand that, yes? She says here, those who have not brought the lower passions into subjection to the higher powers of the being, inferring that there must be a group who have. Can we see that inference? So there's a group who have brought this into subjection to this, and there's those who haven't. And it's simply another way of expressing those who are under the old covenant and those who are under the new covenant. If you're under the old covenant, and there are only two groups, would you be a true prophet or a false prophet? So a false prophet is someone who is under the old covenant, someone who has not brought their lower passions, their lower powers, into subjection to the higher powers. So they're controlled by their emotions, by their feelings. If we don't put line upon line and see that all of these stories are teaching the same thing, we don't have a broad picture of what a tare looks like, or a foolish virgin. Too often we go to Christ object lessons and we see the definition of a foolish virgin is someone who looks really nice, really beautiful, and no one can tell the difference between them. But you go to other models, other lines, and you begin to see otherwise. Because I'm saying that same person, that foolish virgin, who loves the truth, who has appreciation of the truth. In fact, if you read that passage, you know what Ellen White says? She says they all look good, but they haven't brought their nature into submission to Christ. It's talking about this issue here. Everything is about the role of the heart. Christ isn't really bothered too much about the higher powers, because everybody can do that. And we're going to see that as we move on. One more passage. Child Guidance 382. Paragraph 1. Remember we spoke about if you get this mesh and you start distorting it, it begins to affect your spirituality. Yeah? It can do this through your own misbehaviour and also the misbehaviour of your parents. Because we know we've got hereditary as well as cultivated tendencies to deal with. Problems that our parents gave to us, as well as the ones that we bring upon ourselves. We do not mark out any precise line to be followed in diet, but we do say that in countries where fruits, grains and nuts where there are fruits, grains and nuts in abundance, flesh food is not the right food for God's people. I have been instructed that flesh food has a tendency to animalize the nature. What nature would be animalized? Got it here yet? The lower passions have their seat in the physical. So when you start physically eating something that's not good for you, those chemicals begin to affect your lower powers and they can animalize you, turn you into an animal. Being an animal has its place as long as it's in subjection to the higher powers. I've been instructed that flesh food has a tendency to animalize the nature, to rob men and women of that love and sympathy which they should feel from everyone. Where does love and sympathy reside? In the lower or the higher powers? Lower powers, these are emotions, these feelings of sympathy. So all these emotions begin to get warped and distorted, like anger, like jealousy, like appetite and lust. They begin to get warped and damaged, and instead of being positive attributes of our being, end up being negative, which is why most of you say, oh, they're all bad. So this passage here is teaching that if you eat bad chemicals, so I don't want to call it meat, let's just call it chemicals. If you eat bad chemicals, those chemicals actually affect this lower power, this lower passion.